Hello Commanders and welcome to part 2 of Luigi Percent or Squadmates only. With the changes in mechanics and on enemies having various levels of protection and Shepard being significantly weaker than Mass Effect 1, we have new challenges to face. For this run I'll be swapping to Infiltrator as we will need the tactical cloak to stay hidden at times, to manage enemy aggro, and with a few sections stealthing past enemies enable us to bypass some incredibly tedious sections where the enemies might not be endless, but fighting anywhere up to an hour plus is not always fun. Starting off, as we wake up, we have to make a few kills on our own as we do not have any squad mates yet. Shortly later we meet up with Jacob and we can just sit there and wait while he does all the work versus the mechs, and with some time and tedium he will eventually take care of them. Our next major fight is outside of the escape shuttle bay where Wilson and Jacob slowly but eventually are able to take out all of the Loki mechs. On Freedom's Progress, we start by using some smart positioning to lure out the early mechs, with Miranda doing majority of the work and Jacob being useless. The drone sequence, we actually got pretty lucky and didn't hit the trigger to get them to attack, so I was able to take out the first wave with just my squad mates without fear of retaliation. The later drone series does start to aggro, but we made it through pretty easily. The Ymir mech is a bit of a challenge. The squad mates are very dumb and die quickly. I did my best to spread them out, so hopefully we could juggle the Ymir's aggro, but Jacob, being the dummy piece of poop he is, decides to die quite frequently. But I was able to hide in a building and get the Ymir to focus on me while Miranda slowly whittled him down over a period of a few minutes. Our next stop is for our most important squad mate, Kasumi, whose Shadow Strike will be our primary source of damage. Being a flat damage and her stealth in and out give her high damage and survivability to make this run a lot less frustrating to deal with. With our thief in hand, we head out for the next challenge. We begin our recruitment drive with Morden. Both Miranda and Kasumi have overload, which helps with the blue sun shields, and from a defensive position we just have to wait for Kasumi to sneak attack everyone into oblivion. As we progress further, we run into more Vulture, Varen and Krogan. Miranda's warp helps and Kasumi's stealth makes slow but eventual progress. The high ground Vulture holding rockets present a problem as the allies tend to focus for body shots, and the Vulture's regeneration can sometimes make them unkillable, so when available we will just run past them and avoid them. For the fan section, we quickly as we can insert the Cura and turn on one fan. Ignoring the rocket troopers, we head to the next fan, utilizing our stealth to hit the next trigger to end the mission quickly. When recruiting Garrus, during the approach we sabotage both the mech and the gunship to help our chances of survival later. After meeting Garrus, when holding the bridge, we don't have much trouble, allowing Miranda and Kasumi to do a bulk of the work holding off the enemy Eclipse. Down in the basement, things get a little bit tricky. Taking the left path to get Miranda and Kasumi to jump the barriers was a little bit tricky, because Kasumi did not want to jump over them to commit into her Shadow Strikes, but with a bit of positioning and we eventually take the pyro out, the door is of no concern. The right door I was planning to be potentially impossible, but things worked out a lot easier. With the right spawn cycle and the Krogan reinforcement had come in, stealthing past, I managed to trigger the door without having an additional wave of enemies spawn, leading to an easy end of this section. Fighting our way through the Krogan reinforcement, we fight Garn, who is an incredibly tanky Krogan, but we have our own secret weapons to help bring him down without too much difficulty. The gunship battle is where things take a bit of a turn for the worse. Miranda and Kasumi are capable of firing at the gunship but rarely ever choose to do so, with the center of the ship where they are aiming being off screen most of the time. Combined with both of them getting stuck on the architecture at times, I was forced to finish the fight by manually casting Miranda's warp on the gunship until it died. When recruiting Jack, starting off in a defensive position leads to a significant number of respawns and took quite a while to get to the point of releasing Jack. The rest of the level was pretty much non-eventful. The final fight versus the Warden went pretty easily. Luckily the squad would use overload on the pylons and were able to take out the Warden with little trouble. When recruiting Grunt, the first third of Grunt's recruitment provided no problems. The underground area was full of Krogan provided a little issue as I was lacking in fire damage to offset the Krogan's regeneration. After proving that I can beat them, I stealthed through the rest of the way to speed up the run considerably. Fighting Jador was an expected problem, as with the Ymir mech, multiple Krogan, and still lack of a fire option, I resorted to juggling Krogan out of the door one at a time and taking them out while isolated. Luckily, the rare glitch when consuming shadow sneaks, they flew off into the distance, had happened a few times, which helped me immensely. After this, it was just a matter of juggling the Ymir mech's aggro until it died, before taking out Jador, who herself is not a problem. When entering Horizon, it is a slow grind through all the waves of collectors, with the most dangerous ones being the heavies with the beam weapon. At no point did I struggle too much, though in the area before the final door, for some reason the Scion didn't spawn, which made things 100 times easier. And after many deaths, I noticed just as you enter, you can see the Scions in the distance behind the central pillar. And with careful positioning, I was able to send my squad to fight the Scions without them becoming aggressive and spawning any of the Husk waves. After a few minutes, the Scions die, no Husk spawn, and the first wave is dealt with very easily. The middle waves were of no real concern, and then the final Praetorian fight. After a few different deaths, it was the next boss area where I thought the run might end, with the first couple of runs with the two Scions and the massive waves of Husks. My allies ended up dying too frequently, either getting stunned by the Scions or killed by the hordes of Husks. I had to figure out a new strategy. And goes down, with perhaps the most difficult fight down so far, and more easily than I imagined. I set off to the rest of the game with increased vigor. When recruiting Samara, everything up to the gunship was easy enough. Again, we had gunship issues with the squad choosing not to shoot at it, or when they did, very little, relying on manually casted warps bringing it down over a slow process. The boss fight was nothing really to talk about either. And next, Kasumi's loyalty, the true Kasumi test. Funnily enough, she didn't need Shepard to help her, as she was able to solo the entire thing on her own, taking quite a while to complete, but at no point did I feel like it was unwinnable. Then into the Hawk fight, we ended up with some weird instances. With me staging in the back and relying on Kasumi solely, she was able to take out all the enemies, but Hawk's normal cycle of disappearing after each wave didn't happen, and he stayed up and drew wave after wave while hovering overhead. After the cutscene where Kasumi weakens his shields, things go weird again, as Hawk finally retreats under the map and doesn't come out for a significant amount of time. After waiting and waiting and waiting, I estimated that he goes down under for all of the time that he should have stayed down previously, added up, and after about 15 minutes of waiting, he finally pops back up and Kasumi is able to finish the job. Seriously, why did she even need me here? For Thane's recruitment, there wasn't much to report other than my team getting smashed on the bridge due to the rocket drones firing and running out of Medigel. I had to resort to using my cloak to bypass the last group rather than repeatedly trying to finish the fight and my allies dying again and again and again. When recruiting Tali, the Geth were the hardest challenge so far, with their aggression and high numbers causing some issues within the team, but with some positioning and tactics I eventually managed to win. The Colossus fight was far easier to accomplish than I expected. Sitting on the high ground to the right, I was able to whittle it down without little fear. Kasumi would not shadow sneak it for some reason. And now we come to the part where I really thought this run would die, and unexpectedly it was Grunt's loyalty mission. The mass hordes of Varen in the first wave are a nightmare to deal with. With Grunt's incendiary armor helping, but it isn't enough. With no defensible positions and the Varen coming in from both sides, I had to eventually reload an earlier save, do Garrus's loyalty first to get his armor penetration ammo, and then return. Even with Garrus's upgrade, it was still a nightmare of kiting, juggling aggro, and position manipulation. After approximately 50 tries and deaths, I managed to be able to do it and take the final round. The second round of Clixons are much easier to deal with. Even though they do have some fire damage, they are far less of a threat than the Varen are. And then into the Threshermaw fight. As the Maw seemed inclined to aggro on me, it left my team available to attack the Threshermaw at will, and on the final seconds of the fight, Garrus and Grunt managed to take down the Threshermaw without me having to fire a shot. The Gavog fight wasn't anything to stress on, as both my guys were easily able to take him and his flunkies down. With far less Varen to be had, Morden's Incinerate, he and Grunt are easily able to take out the entire Worklock base and confront Malon. In the derelict collector vessel, the first ambush went better than expected, as Shepard not moving caused the two Scions to stay stationary, and from a position of safety were able to take them out. At the Praetorian fight, I used the same strategy of circling around a pillar until my squad took him out. The rest of the fights were nothing to write home about, other than the last Scion not aggroing properly, giving me another easy kill. Grunt's natural bulk helped with the hordes of husks and abominations, so we brought him for this mission. On Jack's loyalty, we started off things pretty easy, but during the hall fight I ran into an issue with the Vulture being on high ground and out of reach of Kasumi's Shadow Sneak. They regenerated too fast for me to kill them without any fire damage. Luckily I forgot to give Jack pull, and with that added to the squad and some squad cryo ammo, they slowly managed to take them all out. Tali's loyalty was pretty straightforward. Outside of the 2-level fight just before finding her father, I used stealth to skip to the cutscene of her finding her father, as the respawns from the door are nigh infinite and I did not want to sit there forever. With Miranda's loyalty, I used stealth at a few junctions to speed up the fights, as there is significant enemy presence and is one of the most tedious missions for me, so in order not to just sit here for the next 2 hours, I just skipped past. The boss fight provided no difficulty either. On the Derelict Reaper, leading up to the Long Walk is fairly uneventful. The Long Walk section is the main reason I chose Infiltrator, as we would just stealth past every enemy and hit the door to bypass what would otherwise be an incredibly slow and painful section, but is absolutely doable. In the Reaper core, as the allies will not attack the core, we cheese it with a shot from the cane to end this mission as quickly as possible. During Legion's loyalty mission, nothing much to report. The final hold segment was surprisingly easy, as I expected it to be much harder, but Kasumi and Legion were able to take care of it without much difficulty. Arriving at the collector base, our choices are Kasumi and Grunt, as Grunt's bulk and Kasumi's Shadow Sneak are what we need to progress through these sections. The first section we use our stealth to speed up the button pressing on the vents for Tali, and the bubble section are completed without any trouble at all, with Kasumi being able to stand outside of the bubble without issue. For the final fight, I brought Thane and Miranda, both for their warp, as the allies won't attack the Reaper directly or cast warp on their own. So now begins the slow progress of spamming warp until the Proto-Reaper dies. In conclusion, is it possible to beat Mass Effect 2 while doing absolutely nothing? All things considered, I will say a resounding yes. I was incredibly surprised that it was possible at all, with some junctures like Garrus's recruitment, Grunt's loyalty being incredibly difficult to pass, and all of the Praetorians were much easier to take out than expected. With many of the bugs that I found, it seemed based around triggering with ships' positions and activities, and sometimes doing nothing found out to be a completely valid strategy, especially against Scions. The 100% hero of this challenge was Kasumi and her stealth attack. While I believe this run to be possible without it, it would take such an insanely longer time. It's not something that I would like to experience. Next, I'll be working on Mass Effect 2 Solo, and then Mass Effect 3, Luigi, and Solo percents. If there is any interest, I'd even consider doing Andromeda at some point in both Luigi and Solo. Thanks for watching, Commander. I should go.